Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Strife's Sanctum podcast. My name is Citizen Strife, and this week I get to dabble back into Final Fantasy. Because, of course, I get to do that. But as you can see by the title, it's going to be a little bit different than talking about a game or talking about a randomizer or something. This is something that has been prevalent for a long time. I would say until around Final Fantasy VIII, Final Fantasy IX, Final Fantasy X-ish, when things started to become a little bit better? Question mark? But the early Final Fantasy games, and there were specifically a couple that really shine, were very rough around the edges. Quite a bit. And that's not even talking about their battle systems and things. This is just random stuff that didn't work, was working and then didn't work again, worked in a different version and did work, or they just translated them very badly and it just went haywire. And the only way that I can really describe it and how I managed this process was I was able to go on Reddit and ask people, okay, was there anything just notorious that I might have missed? Because these are things that I just know inherently, having played especially those first 10 games. And then, with some of the more recent ones, is there something that I just missed that was so that it became notable? And there were a few, and I'll talk about them. I'll try to go in kind of chronological order, but I will bounce around if the situation calls for it. But then a lot of this information was either something that I had experienced, and I will mention that when I get to them, or were things that I didn't know were glitches in the games where I already knew that some existed. And specifically the first 6. That's really where the meat of this stuff is going to come from, is those first 6 games, and specifically 1 and 6. Because, my god, the sheer amount of glitches to equipment, progression items, where enemies are placed, what your items can do, being able to duplicate items, fucking hell, this is just insane. So, again, a lot of this is possibly information you already know, and I'm just listing things off. But in the occasion, and most occasions where I know I've seen these or exploited them myself, I'll go in detail. So I don't know how long this is going to take, but man, Final Fantasy had it rough. Because we start with Final Fantasy 1, and it's already bad enough. It's bad enough that Final Fantasy 1 really doesn't show you stats of items without trying to figure out, okay, you can only carry 4 items of weapons and armor at a time. I forget if you can only carry 4 items at a time, now that I think about it. It's kind of nuts. Certain headpieces, armor, shields, mail, the equipment systems all over the page. So that's bad enough. But then you consider that a lot of weapons were Were Sword, Bane Sword, Coral Sword. They don't work. They don't do anything. And so the enemy specific damage to certain enemy types doesn't work in the original version. But then magic users don't work. I've had stuff like Bane work. I even had Bane defeat Tiamat once, but it was rare. Instant death stuff does work, usually on you, but buffing your stats or making enemies worse, it doesn't help. Or there's, what it says, lock 2. It increases enemy evasion instead. So something that's supposed to stop an enemy from moving makes them go faster, or makes them less likely to be hit. Certain spells are geared to something higher. It says heal 2, hell, Hel. Heal 2 works like heal 3. Okay. But even it says the pixel remaster doesn't work. So, fear has no effect. So apparently even the pixel remaster is fair. But the biggest glitch, I'd say, bar none, is the ineffectiveness. Whether they designed it that way or they forgot to implement it, if an enemy dies, if you attack them, it's ineffective. You have to attack a thing. You have to manage your expectations and figure out, is this guy going to die fast enough before I attack so that I'm not attacking dead air and getting an ineffective strike. You have the Peninsula of Power. So those 4 to 6 little spots where giant trolls, necro bulls, all those things come in. The freaking ice wolves with the freaking frost spell from way late in the game. Good leveling spot, but then there's that weird thing, like if you over level, you actually get worse. Like certain classes are apparently worse if you level up higher, because you need I think it's like the master. Like if you use monk, you should actually level up the monk before you level up the master. Because paradoxically, the master gets less stat boosts via level than the original monk does, while everybody else, their higher level class gets more. So you're supposed to stay at a certain level to beat the castle over deals, but you gotta do the thing to do the thing, and then the other guy can't do it. It's weird. And then the thief can't run effectively. So instead of becoming a ninja, which is his only good feature, being able to run away doesn't work. So it's tied to the order of orientation in your party. It's really stupid. I forget what this says. Weird magic glitch, including house. Oh, it could be like a saving issue or an HP issue, but something involving houses. Which, far be it from me to question why you need to use a tent to save a game, rather than just being able to save a game. But yeah, you can only save a game in a tent, in a town with an inn, or using a house or cottage or something. Don't ask me. It makes no sense to me, but that's how Final Fantasy 1 was designed. It was the first game. And then you get to Final Fantasy 2 and it gets worse. Final Fantasy 2 is terrible. And I haven't played the Pixel Remaster. Don't quote me on it. People say it's better. I don't know for sure. I'll get to it someday, whether I want to or not. It'll be one of those kicking and screaming situations. But yes, it's really bad. It's the prototype for the Saga franchise. You do more stuff of a certain thing, you're good at that certain thing. But like, you're supposed to level up your HP by having less HP through the fight, but you have a certain threshold that you have to do the thing, and it's like people hit themselves and then cancel out. You actually can buff up your stats and your spells by selecting a prompt, but before you put the prompt in, you can actually cancel out, and then you attack each other to do damage. It's just silly. And then you have the problem of, say you do an evasion shield bug. So the shields, like if you do shields, you buff up your evasion to the point where enemies can't hit you. And I've actually done this. And the one playthrough I managed to beat was, I think, the PS1 version, the Origins version, some such, was I buffed up my evasion to the point where I never got hit, and I was barehanded. So I could do damage, because being barehanded does more damage than anything else in the game. Don't ask me. But if you don't get hit, most of your other stats don't go up, so you can't do as much damage, so you can't level up your strength, so you actually fight a boss, and then you actually can't do damage to the boss, or they outdamage you, or they don't hurt you, so it's just a stalemate. So I have to wait and fight more enemies the legit way somehow to buff up my stats to the point that I can get through this boss gauntlet that exists for some reason. you can accidentally walk to Mysidia, which is like mid to late game area with a bunch of spells and stuff. So the enemies, if you walk around the original area, walk around some mountains the wrong direction, you fight these hard ass freaking enemies that are just way harder than you, and you die, losing progress. I've done that myself, and I've seen streamers do it. Several spells don't work. Including Ultima. Ultima's weird. Apparently it's based on, oh god, how did they say the calculation was? I think it was based on the amount of stuff you have mastered. Ultima is better or worse. And it could also have to do with magic as well. So it's the stuff that you have mastered and the magic that you have that determines how much damage you do. It's so weird. Because you have to level up everything. Or you can do what another streamer that I watched one time did, was level up teleport and just beat bosses with teleport. Because you can do that. But, like, having to level up every single spell and every single piece of equipment is kind of awkward. It is very awkward. It is very slow. It reminds me of the worst aspects of, say, Secret of Mana, which I'd already done too. I hated how that system was level up your charges, level up your magic, because it was slow. And this is also just as bad, but with everything, you know? And the fact that, like, teleport, a spell that never works on bosses, can work on bosses if you get to, like, level 8 or level 9, then you're good. Or how the best spell in the game doesn't do jack shit damage unless you grind everything, and then it works. Final Fantasy III, a little less here, but this is really interesting. Apparently, you can actually get onion equipment, really high-level onion equipment for your characters via a item duplication glitch and an upgrade glitch, like inside the cave or whatnot. I think you have to have it, like it's an equipment overflow item glitch. I remember seeing the item dupe in 4, 5, and 7 mostly, but never really in 3. So filling that out and doing that is very hard, but doable. Now, I do recall that this is the NES version. A lot of these glitches exist in those original versions. Whether they've been patched out or not, I don't know. Rods don't boost elemental damage. That's sad. I'm looking at this list again because I compiled this list a couple of months ago, and I'm reading it and I'm thinking, this is so wrong. Because that's what the rods do in SNES games. That's their entire design, is to help your elemental damage. And other, even in like Final Fantasy IX with Vivi, that's what they're supposed to freaking do. The fact that they don't is kind of sad. Shields and weapon. Oh yeah. Having shields and weapon elements is messed up. There's a weird thing where you can this one I do distinctly remember because of a YouTube video, was you save Sid and his wife, and Sid jumps for joy, but if you don't leave the screen and you keep talking to him, he'll keep doing a jumping animation, and he'll actually jump out of the screen and out of the building into the black screen, off the camera. You just gotta go back into the house and fix it. Final Fantasy IV, this is at least a little bit more in line with what I remember. Because Final Fantasy I, I distinctly remember a lot. Final Fantasy VI, I distinctly remember a lot. Final Fantasy IV, Final Fantasy V, you don't have as much. It's more exploiting mechanics than anything. But it still happens. A lot of stuff sometimes you'll happen in the randomizer. But the one that is most notorious is the warp glitch that you can do to get the sealed cave item. You get the crystal from the sealed cave, so you don't have to do it. So if you have Rydia leveled up high enough, or a black mage leveled up high enough, you can use the warp spell and just get to the screen with Calbrena and Golbez, and then you don't have to worry about going to the sealed cave. You just walk into the sealed cave, and then the cane scene happens. You don't open the thing. You don't have to fight that, entire dungeon. You avoid all the stupid trapdoors and the evil wall. It's great. So everybody uses it because it's amazing. You get the item and you don't have to deal with it. And, for the sake of a randomizer, it cuts out like 15, 20 minutes of progression, So, 10 or 15, give or take. But, weapon glitches and stuff. It says the black robe increases the wrong stat. This is back when wisdom and intelligence improved different spells. You didn't have magic as a base stat. In the early games, you had intelligence and wisdom because they were trying to follow the D&D model. But it would often be screwy as to what stat did what thing for what character. And usually, like, wisdom is the healing stat. Intelligence is the damaging stat. It got flipped. And I guess the black robe buff helps the wrong thing. Which makes perfect sense. When you consider what this franchise has been doing with equipment forever. I mean, you have like overflow glitches, other weird glitches, the things that I'm not really as good at. They exist. Like there's an MP overflow glitch. There's the self glitch, which apparently, heals you a shit ton of HP early or something weird like that. There's a floor glitch, managing all of the thing. The other thing that I would say is more of the translation issues than anything else, which is what we're finally going to get into, is Marlboro. In the West, everybody calls it Marlboro because it's a play off the Marlboro company. But I remember playing Final Fantasy 16 and seeing the Morbol or Molbol, I think it's Molbol, and wondering what the fuck the name is, because forevermore they've been using the Marlboro thing in the East, and then I think in 16 they finally switched back to Molbol or Morbol. I believe that is technically what the translation is, but you get used to something and you're just like, this seems wrong. It's Marlboro. It's always Marlboro. It's been Marlboro tentacles forever. But apparently Final Fantasy IV got it. Final Fantasy IV had it right the entire time, and almost every other game since. Well, except for 6, because they called them evil Oscars. That was dumb. Just calling them evil Oscars doesn't do them justice. But 7 onward, they were called Marlboro. Hooray. But interesting little factoid for me. Final Fantasy V, speaking of translation errors, this is mostly Final Fantasy V doesn't suffer too many glitches, but my god, it's the big glitch is the chemist mix, because it's something called the Kiss of Blessing. I played as chemist in my last playthrough of Final Fantasy V. I don't like the class. It takes a lot of mental gymnastics to remember and to think, okay, this thing turns into this thing, and you have to kind of have a guide, or it's like taking a test and you have to remember these things. But apparently, if you do something known as the Kiss of Blessing to the final boss in the tree form, the X-Death form, you actually skip the Neo X-Death fight altogether. I've never done it myself. I have seen it in videos and seen other people do it. But that's honestly pretty crazy. I forget if it has something to do with it being a death mechanic, or an instant death mechanic, a berserk mechanic, something weird and screwy in the code that allows you to kind of get away with that. So you only have to do the X-Death fight and you're done. It's really interesting. But Final Fantasy V is known for bad translation. Because this was translated way late in a console cycle and not really done in the SNES era. You know, you didn't have the Woolsey thing, but we'll get to that. We'll get to that with Final Fantasy VI. But Final Fantasy V has its own problems. Ferris, her dialogue is crap. Her entire aura is just turned into, I'm pirate. Dar, I be pirate. Dar. It's just like, there's a place for that, but it doesn't fit. And when you consider that Ferris is one of the few characters that has like actual interesting like ideas at play, being a female pirate, you know, being ostracized or feeling that he's ostracized for being a pirate, you know, a female leader, you know, so that she acts very butch. You know, the fact that you can act butch and not go Darby Hardy everywhere, you know, the fact that that's all she does in the PSX version. When you also consider that the PSX version is very fucking slow, so that's more of a porting issue than anything else, because God, every game ported onto the PSX is slow as shit in menus and transition screens. That's bad. But I do want to mention one specific translation that I'll never forget. The Wyvern. A Wyvern enemy. You'll see it everywhere. Wyvern, you know, flying drake, dragon-ish kind of thing. Wyvern from Final Fantasy IV. Boss. Okay, easy. What do they call him in Final Fantasy V? I shit you not. I will try to make this slow in the microphone so you hear what I'm saying. Wyvern. I repeat, as written, Wyvern. Yburn. How anyone thought that was a translation to anything puts even son of a submariner and this guy are sick to just a higher fucking standard. It's just like, how? I'm never gonna forget it. Let's see. Final Fantasy. For the longest time, I put Final Fantasy VI as my favorite until I recently just said 10 is just better design. Going through Final Fantasy VI over and over again, you see the warts in it. You really do. I love Final Fantasy VI's characters and story, but man, is it designed really fucking weird. Let's go through it. Ted Woolsey, the translator for like mid-era Squaresoft games in the 90s. He wasn't there for super long, only for a couple of major games, but one of them happened to be Final Fantasy VI. And, you know, I think it was something where spacing issues and whatnot had things to do with it, but you had things like Son of a Submariner and Kefka yelling hate everywhere. And I'm wondering if he actually does say bitch every 5 seconds after he gets stabbed, you know. Just little things like that. Or, you know, to be fair, some of it was not his fault. Some of it was Nintendo. You can't say holy, can't say death. You have to say doom and pearl, you know. Pearl is an interesting way of saying holy. Funny enough, pearl is how I consider pearl wind and shit. I can't think of it any other way, you know, because white wind, I don't see any reason why you couldn't have called it white wind, but pearl wind, I guess, is the healing spell, you know, because they call it white wind and everything else later. But holy death, okay, I get it. Final Fantasy VII, they kind of got away with it because they went back to PlayStation, or they went with PlayStation, so they didn't have as many like kerfuffles with it. But man, they still have so many other glitches in this game. The fact that the evasion bug exists, so that if your magic evasion is 128, you can't be hit by anything. So, yeah, one of the bugs one of the stats does not work as intended and is instead tied, like both of the evasion stats are tied to one of them. So if you level it high enough, you almost never get hit. Or if you equip an Illumina a Ragnarok, you almost never get hit. You equip a Zephyr Cape, you almost never get hit. Shit like that. The Vanish Doom X Zone trick. You cast Vanish on an enemy, or an enemy like, say, the Entanger, which is already invisible. You cast Doom or X Zone on it, poof. It doesn't matter if they're a boss. It doesn't matter if they're, a flag that avoids death or whatever. They're gone. X Zone, you just see this big, shadow move, and then whatever was there is gone, and the music stops, and it's happy time. Realm Sketch is bugged to the point where games have crashed and save files have been corrupted, and I don't like Realm anyway, so any more reason not to use Realm is great on me. To be fair, she has the greatest magic stat in the world, despite being a 10-year-old girl. I've never understood it. I've never liked it. Whatever. But hey, in a randomizer, you don't have Sketch, you don't need to worry about it. In fact, they even fixed it to the point where they don't crash your fucking game. But Sketch is situational. It doesn't have the versatility of Mog's dances or Gao's cool list of enemy rages. The versatility is not as prevalent because you have to, much like Gao, you have to kind of know what, as long as you know what you're doing, I guess Sketch could be useful, but you don't know if you're going to get the skill that you want with the enemy you want. Same with Control. You have to control an enemy and release it, and you're just like, It's Control is good for getting lore. It's just like Manipulate in Final Fantasy VII, which is what they took. They took this from later on to do that. But other than gaining lores, I've never really found a reason for Control either. So Realm's usefulness is very limited. Again, super high magic stat. Aside from that, the Interceptor bug. Shadow has this cool ability where his dog will block most of the attacks for him. So if you put on beads or Zephyr Cape or something, he just evades almost everything innately without even his normal evasion stat. And then Interceptor can do damage or try to instantly kill somebody. But if a monster uses a attack called the Rippler effect, Interceptor is bugged to the point of being gone. Well, that sure takes away Shadow's coolness, doesn't it? Opera House can soft lock. Probably has to do either with the time or the enemies that are there. Wait, actually, I remember this one. It's something to do with the timer, and apparently, you can actually either warp back to this area or be sent back, depending on where you are in the game, to a point in the Opera House. It's weird. I'd have to look it up again just to make sure. But apparently, you're right next to Ultros before he drops the safe or drops the anvil or whatever he drops on Celeste, and it's a weird soft lock. There's also a thing called Wind God Gao, where you just have wind slashes with Gao and he just goes fucking nuts. Cyan can just turn berserk and do a shit ton of damage. Lots of cool, funky shit in Final Fantasy VI. It is very wonky. It is very exploitable. But it is broke as shit. Starting in Final Fantasy VII, you don't really have a lot of stuff broken. I mean, you do have a couple of weird glitches, but it's mostly just translation errors. One glitch I never knew about was magic defense. I don't care about magic defense anyway, but now I know I never have to again if I ever replay this game. Because magic defense doesn't work. And if you recall, mid-game, you can get an item called the Wizard Bracelet, which is nothing but magic defense. Lo and behold, it doesn't work. So you're not equipping anything. Oh, goody. I saw this once. This was one I never knew, but it's very once in a blue moon kind of situation. I never thought I would see this, but it was actually really cool. say you cast bio on an enemy and it counts. And I don't know if this was something that it was boss specific as a weird glitch, because it happened to Godo, the boss in the pagodas where Yuffie fights the thing. He cast poison, and again, I'm watching the second hand, so I saw this happen. I didn't do it myself. I don't know the mechanics. But he casts poison, and normally it's just tick damage. It's good. It's good tick damage. I've used it against Materia Keeper and Lost Number. You know, bio is pretty effective in the game. Sorry, throat's being a little dry here. But it ticked down to like a perfect amount of like 7777 or something. And I think because the 7777 or 6666 or something is bugged, or like 777, some weird number, right? Instead of doing tick damage, the boss just exploded. He just died. I would not be able to do it again if I tried. Like, me, myself, if I wanted to try it and do it, I would not be able to do it. Seeing it happen was like one of those once-in-a-lifetime things. You're just like, okay, this isn't like gearing the 777 trick to work. You know, that is an easy mechanic to exploit. Poison damage to a certain HP so that it just plain dies is nuts. But by and large, I'd say Final Fantasy VII is more notorious for just some naming conventions or some wonky boss designs or enemy designs. Like, some of them like look like fucking cardboard snakes and other kind of because the designs are just kind of. But the two biggest, like the three biggest ones that I know of are translation errors that have been fixed or should have been fixed. But one that has definitely been fixed from here on out. And you'll still have people say it should have been Aerith because that's what we grew up as. Again, she's been called Aerith ever since then. It was a mistake in the translation. So her name is Aerith, and I'm going with it because that's what they've been going with for 25 years at this point. It was a mistake, and they've been calling her Aerith ever since. So yeah, Aerith, that sort of thing. This guy are sick. You walk into a pipe in Sector 5 and Aerith goes, "This guy are sick." And of course, attack while its tail is up. It's going to counterattack with its laser. So you do. And then he attacks you with his laser and you get hurt and you wonder why. Well, he fucking warned you, didn't he? Alright. But, Final Fantasy VIII. Let's see here. So, Final Fantasy VIII is fun. For a little bit of the wrong reasons. But they didn't translate this very well. They had a lot more dialogue for Squall, and they didn't know how to translate it, so his catchphrase was probably never meant to exist. He was meant to be a bit of a dick, or more of a dick, I guess, or more of an internal monologue sort of guy, more than he already was, but he would just say, whatever. Or you would see the ellipses, and they wouldn't translate it, because they ran out of time, or they didn't know what to say, or they couldn't fit the dialogue. Or you'd have Ultimicia's dialogue with K's in it instead of C's. You'd say, "Cursed seed, across time, I sow time compressed." Like, what is she, Russian? Is she European? Like, I don't get it. Why? I mean, did she play Mortal Kombat? I don't fucking know. I'm not the first to make that joke. The hot dogs. This was another thing that struck me. Apparently, this is an inside joke to Japanese schools. Specifically like middle school or high school. The idea that like Japanese bread, like bread rolls and stuff, always sells out. But because this was back in the area, think of like Phoenix, right, where everything is in California when we're totally in Japan. So instead of LA, we're not in Tokyo anymore. But yeah, everything is retranslated to fit American. So Instead of like melon bread and crab bread and other stuff, you get hot dogs. So everybody goes nuts for hot dogs. We don't actually see the hot dogs. I think what somebody said was in the actual final credit sequence, Zell is eating bread. I'd have to check that, but instead of a hot dog, he's choking on some bread. Let's see, Final Fantasy IX. There's not a lot here, but one glitch I know specifically was Beatrix, the person who should have been in the party but wasn't ever put in the party unless it was a glitch. I hate you, game. Beatrix should be playable in the remake. I fucking swear to Christ. But yeah, Beatrix, one of her moves, which innately means that one of Steiner's moves, the Thunder Slash, doesn't work. I don't know why. It has a hit rate of 0 in it. It doesn't work. It sucks. Final Fantasy X. You can win blitzball games by hiding, like getting a goal, and then hiding behind your goalie. So you can either keep passing, between your defenders and just keep the ball away, or you can just hide behind a goal, and enemies can't hit you. It's weird. There's a thing in Final Fantasy X-2 where you can actually screw up the completion percentage in Xanarkand by doing that either first or last in Chapter 5, so where you can't get like the one of the best dress spheres in the game. So you have to do it in a certain order to ensure that Xanarkand is done properly. I mean, you have to do all the stuff anyway because it's very wonky how that game is designed, but the fact that one of the episodes can fuck up depending on where you do it, it's kind of interesting. This one I got from Reddit, and it's because I don't play Final Fantasy 14. I've made it perfectly clear. I'm not an MMO guy. I'm not an MMO person. Never have been. I played like one or two for like a day or so. Final Fantasy 14. I think they call this Raubon Savage. Raubon Savage. This one, oh god, how would I have explained it? Apparently there's like a raid or some high level instance of a fight or a treasure hunt or something, and everybody's queued up to do it, and it gets clogged to the point where it's broken. Either the game itself isn't working, the queue itself fucked everything up, and only certain people got in and they got cut off, and then like servers got shut down or something fucky happened. Yes, the technical term is something fucky. Great. But yeah, it was the Raubon Savage, Raubahn. If you were there, you'll know more specifically what happened. All I can say is that, I mean, you're trying to queue in something that potentially millions of people could be doing all at once. Having worked as a freaking greeter, I kind of know the frustration that people would have of trying to fix something that, you're trying to stop people from getting somewhere, but if you can't stop people, then, all hell's going to break loose. It makes perfect sense. So either they bugged the game, or they bugged the server, or they bugged the location where this was supposed to happen, and just hours of wait, and then just people just being pissed off. I get that. I would totally understand that happening, which is why, people design this shit so this doesn't happen. But let's see. This is one I know, and this will be the last one so far. Final Fantasy Mystic Quest. I haven't talked about Mystic Quest much on its own, other than I liked it. I mean, it's still got some things I like about it, even if it's bare, it's boring, doesn't really have a story to it, but it's functional, and it's got great music. It's baby's first RPG, and it's fine, but it's got stuff. But the biggest glitch that I remember, and there's a couple other ones here that I don't remember off the top of my head, but the one that I remember thinking is the most hilarious thing I've ever seen. You get to the Dark King, the big bad of the entire game. You're expecting him to be the biggest challenge and the biggest threat, even for a game that's a little bit mindless. You expect him to do a lot of damage. You can kill him with Cure. Most spells can do anywhere from about 500 to maybe even 2,000 damage. Cure does about 15 to 20,000 damage. So you cast it a couple of times, he fucking dies. Or he goes right to his other forms, and then he fucking dies. So the final boss is... I don't even know if he's considered undead. It's weird. Like, he's just the most basic-ass cure spell. Cure. Kills the final boss. I've never seen that. But, again, what can I say? Final Fantasy is weird. You know, for good, for bad, it's weird. And just anything that you can think of happening has probably happened. Equipment bugs, translation errors, and again, it's not a perfect scenario. It's never gonna be perfect, but I think it's just funny that you develop things for so long and then just things either break, whether you intended them to or not, or you try to fix something and it still breaks. So, yeah. Less stuff happened as it went along, but yeah, it's not good. But what is good is that I'm done for today. And I get to work on episode I guess a little bit, so I'll get to that on my own. But talking about stuff going forward, we've got Gungslinger Girl next week. Very, very good. I'm going to love talking about that. Apollo Justice, Ace Attorney, which I'm actually going to start, playing through myself. I already rewatched it in preparation for playing it for YouTube. So I'll be talking about Apollo Justice. Cashier Sins, how I got into JRPGs and anime. That episode should be nice. Hige Hero, how I shaved and took in a high school runaway. Again, that's the name they go with. I'll just call it Hige Hero. It's a little easier to talk about. Danganronpa, Trigger Happy Havoc, Golden Boy. Fucking Golden Boy, I swear. That one won't take long, but it will be stupid. I love it. And this one is interesting. This is one I came up with the idea fairly recently. And I want to do this one because I remember the first couple of episodes I did. I talked about Ys 8. Everybody loves Ys 8. And I do too. But one of the things that I love about Ys 8 more than anything, like the characters or the just the overall vibe of it, the music, the character switching, all that stuff. What I like most and what I want to talk about and dig into is how it ties in both sets of its narratives, the shipwrecked island and finding castaways, with exploring the island and figuring out what you're doing there, why Adol is dealing with Donna, and how you keep progressing. You keep going to area to area to area, but you're also allowed to see where you're not allowed to go as you go along the game. So it feels very fluid. And how this entire island is designed, this Isle of Seiren, is something that this game excels at so well, and I wanted to talk about it. So it will be the art of exploration and progression in Ys 8. So that episode should be interesting. But as far as this episode goes, I'm done for now, and I'll see you next time. Citizen Strife, signing off.